Hello, welcome to week 11, our last online class for this course. And today we're going to talk about treatment interventions that are based on negative reinforcement functions. And as we've talked about previously, several people have suggested, several studies have suggested, I happen to believe it myself, that that is negative reinforcement, escaping, avoiding unpleasant or undesired demands or activities is probably the most common variable that maintains maladaptive behaviors. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One reason is that people with intellectual disabilities often can't figure out creative, socially acceptable ways of escaping demands or unpleasant activities, as those of us who don't have intellectual disabilities often do. So we may learn how to avoid unpleasant tasks by, hiding from our bosses or family members, sending your kids to the movies when that becomes an unpleasant situation, talking your way out of a project, or talking your way into getting more time to do a project, getting other people to do your work. All of these things are sort of arts that we have developed and ways that we control our lives, and that we could avoid being in unpleasant situations or demand situations for extended periods of time. I really think that one of the reasons that these kinds of courses, blended courses, online courses, are so popular with students is, and I realized it myself when I was doing it, is unlike a classroom situation, if you're getting involved in something and you need a break, you're probably not going to raise your hand in class and say, I really need a break from this crap. But when you're sitting at your desk and working on it, or reading an article at home, you can do that. You can get up, you can take a break, you can go do something else, and then when you're ready, come back. Well, I guess my point that I'm trying to make here is that people with intellectual disabilities just may not be able to figure out those creative ways. So they come up with more of the straightforward ways of getting out of demands or unpleasant situations, which is become physically aggressive, engage in SIB, property destruction. Those are very effective ways also. They all serve the same purpose, which is get out of demands. The other reason that I think that avoiding unpleasant situations has become such a major motivator of maladaptive behaviors is we seem to require a really high level of participation in those kinds of activities. So, I see people all the time who are requesting, compliance levels of 80 or 90%, on-task behavior, 80, 90%. And I think about myself, and I'm rarely compliant 80% of the time. My wife would tell you that number is much, much lower than 80%. Same thing with on task. As I said, I think we figure out ways of giving ourselves a break. So in any case, whatever the reasons are, treatment interventions based on negative reinforcement function are very important, because we do encounter a lot of individuals where this is a variable that is maintaining the maladaptive behavior. So as we talked about last week, there's basically, you use the same strategy that we talked about for positive reinforcement. number one is extinction. If you understand that the behavior is occurring because the individual is trying to escape or avoid an unpleasant situation, well, don't let them escape or avoid. So escape extinction. Now, two things about that. One is sometimes people get confused because they will use the term extinction and ignoring synonymously, and of course they're not. Extinction only involves ignoring if the behavior is maintained by positive reinforcement. On the other hand, extinction, when the behavior is maintained by negative reinforcement, is just the opposite of ignoring. It's basically staying in that person's face and not allowing them to escape or avoid the unpleasant situation. The other ways are antecedent procedures. So you could have antecedent manipulations to reduce the cues associated with unpleasant activities or demands. So in other words, just reduce the demands or get rid of the demands. Or another antecedent approach might be to reduce the aversiveness of the demands. And that could be if it's an academic task, for example, and it's math problems. Instead of having hard math problems, have easy math problems and gradually introduce a couple of hard ones in the easy ones. The other way is, as I mentioned, just giving a break. That seems to be another way to reduce the aversiveness of a demand or an unpleasant activity. So in any case, this first study by Awada is one of the first studies. It's an oldie, but it's a goodie. Is one of the first studies that really looked at negative reinforcement and specifically looked at escape extinction and what the role is. And basically they found that escape extinction can be an effective intervention for target behaviors maintained by negative reinforcement. But there's several big buts here. But number one is when you're doing escape extinction, which means you're not allowing a person to escape, well, that may involve guided compliance or other kinds of hands-on kind of interventions that are not going to allow them to escape. And so one might argue that in itself is punishment. So really it's sort of a combination. It's walking that line between extinction and punishment. On the other hand, you can't always successfully do escape extinction. In some cases, you just can't stop the person from leaving, or you can't or don't want to be able to prevent the person from escaping the situation, in which case you can't use escape extinction. So one alternative is the Vollmer study. Now, we talked about non-contingent positive reinforcement last week for behaviors that were maintained by positive reinforcement, and they were shown to decrease target behaviors. Now, this is a variation of that, which is non-contingent escape, which is used for target behaviors that are maintained by negative reinforcement. So basically, what this is about is it is giving the person the opportunity to escape a demand non-contingently. So, for example, if it is an academic demand that is unpleasant, the person is engaging in the academic demand non-contingently on some kind of schedule And you'll notice that one of the participants, I think his name was Kevin, in the Vollmer study, it actually started that the non-contingent escape was on a continuous schedule. They were just told, okay, we can stop doing math right now, take a break. And the person would leave and come back, and then you'd gradually increase that period. They might work for 30 seconds and then say, great, let's just take a break. And that's non-contingent. It's based on time. It's not based on the person's behavior. So the results of this study demonstrated that the provision of non-contingent escape on a fixed time schedule resulted in substantial decreases in target behaviors maintained by negative reinforcement. Of course, this study, some buts here also, this study also included extinction. So during the non-contingent escape, the person also was not being reinforced and allowed to escape if they engaged in target behaviors. They were just being ignored. This study also introduced a new term, differential negative reinforcement of other behavior, which I thought was kind of interesting also. So with one of the participants, I think it was Mark, depending on his compliance, how compliant he was, he would be able to earn more time where the demand would be removed. So in other words, the contingency is completely reversed. Instead of in negative reinforcement where the individual engages in the target behavior and gets to escape, it's just the opposite. If you participate, then you can earn the opportunity to escape, which, you think about it, makes a lot of sense and is really a pretty straightforward approach. The third study that you're reading this week is another one by Zarconi, and this one investigated the effects of escape extinction and another antecedent approach, which is fading of instructions, compared with only escape extinction. So, I understand what I'm saying. So, you're comparing just extinction with extinction plus actually gradually fading out the instructions. And what they found, I think, is very interesting, is that extinction alone reduced the negatively maintained target behaviors quicker than escape extinction and fading. So let me say that again because it doesn't make sense. That extinction alone, just extinction, reduced negatively maintained target behaviors quicker than doing extinction and gradually fading out the demands, the demand instructions. However, there was a significant extinction burst in the extinction alone condition for 2 of the 3 participants. So extinction alone worked faster, but in a sense there was more pain because there were significant extinction bursts when you just used extinction that you could eliminate by doing extinction along with gradually fading out and fading back in the instructions. So which procedure was better? Well, we'll talk about that next week, and something for you to think about. So that is negative reinforcement, treatments based on negative reinforcement. There's really so many more in this topic that we could talk about. I wish we had more time. There's a lot of other studies, and I wish we could have gotten into some of the contemporary ones. But really, they're all sort of variations of these three articles, the interventions that do come up. So have fun with these this week. And if you have any questions, you can go on the discussion forum and or comments, put them in there, or email me, and I will see you next week.